Hey everybody, it's Scott here, and today we're going to be making up a character using the GURPS 3rd edition system. So, where do we get started? Where do we get started making up a character? The very first thing to do is to determine, of course, what setting the character belongs to. In this case, we're going to make up a typical fantasy character, medieval fantasy type character, and how many character points does that character have to spend. And this will be up to your GM depending on how powerful he wants to start the characters out. Typical GURPS characters are 100 points. Supers are 500. Each of the source books gives you a general idea, but typically 100 point characters. And so we have to decide where we're going to spend our points at. We have to spend those points for attributes, skills, advantages, maybe some other things like spells, although the spells are technically skills themselves. And so today we're going to decide where those points go and build this character, and we're going to do it very quickly. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is determine Beetla's attributes: strength, dexterity, intelligence, and health. You can find this chart throughout the books. The basic book has a nice chart. Compendium 1 has my favorite because it has a lot of listings for what these things mean. Attribute costs from the Hellboy book is fairly pretty, but we're going to use the one from the Compendium 1 book. And we're going to go strength. I don't think she's as strong as the average character. I'm going to give her a strength of 9, and that's going to cost her minus 10 points. So she actually gets 10 points back because that's a disadvantage of such. Then let's see, we're going to go to her dexterity. How quick is she? I think she's above average. She's here on this dexterity chart. You can see average, somewhat agile, agile, very agile. I think she's agile. She's not extremely so, but she's good. So she's going to have a dex of 12. And that dex of 12 is going to cost her 20 points. And I'll just put score and cost right here. Intelligence. She's very intelligent. She's going to be very bright. So we're going to go with a bright. It's going to be 12. That's also going to cost her 20 points. And then her health. And this is where your hit points come from. I think that she is average, 10. And that will cost her nothing because the average attribute costs nothing. Very easy. For a total cost of 40 minus 10, it's going to be 30 points. So what's next? How do we continue to spend our points or gain points? I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, and we're going to go to disadvantages, because disadvantages will give us more points to spend for our character. Now, what kind of disadvantages does this particular character have? There's lots to choose from. Physical appearance is one, and if you look in the book, you'll see in the basic book, I think in Compendium 1 also, you have unnatural feature. An unnatural feature is could be anything. Maybe you have blue skin if you're a human. In this case, this elf was born with horns. She doesn't know why. Maybe she's got some demon blood in her or devil blood in her. Who knows? But we're going to put unnatural feature. Horns. And that's going to be 5 points for her. So now we had 70 points left over. We're now at 75. Okay. And let's see, what else do we have here? Is she beautiful? Not necessarily incredibly beautiful. There's lots of stuff to choose from. Does she have a really nice voice? Is she ugly? Things of that nature. But I'm going to say her looks are average. She's not incredibly beautiful or anything like that. So we're going to skip on to the next section, which is literacy and education. In the GURPS system, you'll find in the book that sometimes your characters can be, depending on the setting, your characters will be literate automatically or illiterate automatically. depending on what type of setting your GM has made up for you. And you'll need to ask, can my character read automatically, or do I need to buy that as an advantage? In the setting that you're playing in, if all the characters can read and write, they're all literate, then not being able to do that, being illiterate, is a disadvantage that will give your character 10 points. If all the characters normally can't read and write, you're playing in some type of very primitive world or apocalyptic setting, then the characters that can read and write have an advantage of literacy that costs 10 points. In this campaign, everybody can read and write, and so can Batla, so she has literacy, and that's going to actually cost her 0 points because that's normal for this game, this campaign, this setting. Okay, continuing on, we look at advantages that alter the ability to learn. Is she some type of genius or natural? Has some type of eidetic memory? And that would be important to note. A scribe or a very intelligent character may have eidetic memory, which means that when you put points into skills, not combat skills and physical skills, but mental-based skills, that the points actually count for more than they normally would. So, for example, the first level, you have a general sense of everything you concentrate on. Any skill points that you put into regular mental skills count double, but this won't affect your psi skills, and it affects your magic skills very little. So, but just bringing that out there, that if you have a super smart character, look carefully at the eidetic memory advantage. But our character has none of these. She's not some type of genius or natural. And we'll move forward. A few minor notes in this category would be animal empathy. Very important for druids and rangers and things like that. So you definitely want to keep that one in mind. Mathematical ability, great for scientists and things like that. So moving on, let's talk about wealth. Does the character have any exceptional wealth? A character that doesn't choose disadvantage will have the average wealth for the campaign setting. There's also some disadvantages you can choose, which will give you some points. For example, Dead Broke gives you 25 points, but your character won't start out with any equipment at all. On the other end of that, very wealthy characters could start out with 20 times the normal money, but it costs you 30 points, and most players just don't want to make that trade-off. So, what do you think is best for your character? I'm going to start out with average wealth. Again, you don't even have to put this on the character sheet. Doesn't cost the character anything, and she's just going to have normal wealth. So what is this starting wealth for the campaign? Let's take a look at that. Starting wealth, so on page 16 of the basic book, for a fantasy medieval world is about 1,000 copper farthings or 1,000 silver, or whatever you want to call that. So we'll actually make a new line here, wealth and equipment. I'll just put down coin. She has 1,000 coin that she can spend on equipment. Okay, so we're moving along. Status and the cost of living. So status is something that the GURPS system introduces. That is a social status ranking, and it can give the character some advantages when dealing with other people. Obviously, if you go talk to someone important, they have that aura about them, and you have to tread lightly around them, that sort of thing. You can see here there's a chart on page 191 of the status that you can purchase. If your GM allows, he may not want his players being king starting off, but each one of these levels of status cost 5 points each, and so you determine where you sit on your social ladder. A free man, ordinary citizen, so to speak, is 0 points. It's average. A servant is lower than that. Outsider, street beggar, a slave. You can also be a squire or a merchant, someone important, a knight, mayor, great merchant, all the way up to king, and the chart shows what sort of all those mean. I'm not going to say she has any special status, might be fun, but I'm not going to include that with this character. She's a normal student of the magical arts and even has very little of that. An interesting note is that on page 16 of the basic book, you'll see that it states that realistically, characters with a settled lifestyle should put 80% of their starting wealth into home, clothing, etc., leaving only 20% of that wealth, that coin, for adventuring gear. If the character isn't some type of traveler, sailor, something like that, their wealth is going to mostly be in their things in their home. So 20% of that 1,000 is only going to be 200 that she would be able to spend for her beginning gear, and the rest of her things will be in her home in the Elven Village that she has collected over the years, mementos, things that she owns of a personal nature that aren't part of her traveling gear. A couple of points on status as well. If you have wealth of wealthy or above, you pay 5 fewer points for high status because wealth helps make that status. I mean, rich people in most societies are considered important already. So that's on page 18 of the basic book. That's an important note. Of course, status gives you a reaction modifier, but you have to remember status is not the same as a social stigma. Social stigmas can be had in conjunction with high status, low status, all of that. You can be a very rich noble and still be an outsider in your community or your society, your culture, and have a social stigma of some kind. All right, let's move forward. So I'm going to change that. Let's go back just for fun. We'll give her status of +1 as a wizard, and that's going to be 5 points, and for that level of status, and that'll just sort of offset the disadvantage of unnatural feature, and that brings us to the advantages being worth 5 points, and so we're back to 70 points left over for this character. The next thing we're going to think about is the reputation of the character. Is this character known for anything? Who knows about that? We're going to give this character a bad reputation just as an example of -1. The levels can go through -1 through -4. The levels of good reputation can also go through +1 to +4, and that gives the character an advantage or disadvantage when they're making reaction rolls to other characters. Now, -1 is going to be 5 points. It's 5 points per level, and since this is a disadvantage, it would be -5 points. However, a small class of people, if you look on page 17, modifies the cost of a reputation. So I'm going to put with a small class of people, her Elven clan, and that's going to modify that right here. Small class of people. It's going to be 1/3 the value rounded down, which is going to bring it to just -1 point. So her disadvantages now are going to equal -6 points. And now she has a small reputation. Now we come to rank. The academic rank of the character, maybe some military rank if the character is a soldier, something like that. Rank is important to think about. Religious rank is in some of the books. There's various things that you would probably need to consider. How do they rank in their organization, and what organization? This character doesn't really have any rank, so to speak of. She probably has a master that teaches her, but she's not part of any type of wizardly college, and even if she was, she would be a student and not have any real rank in that organization. So we're going to skip that, but if your character was a soldier or an important person in an organization, a spy, something like that, you would want to read the rules for rank and make a decision on what rank they were in that organization and pay those character point costs. Alright, we'll start talking about advantages along with the disadvantages at this point, which we've done already a little bit when we are talking about whether the character is literate, whether they have a status. Some of those are advantages as well as disadvantages, but some of these choices we'll be making now are strictly advantages as well. The advantages cost points, and they add various bonuses to the character depending on what they are. Some are just role play, some actually give bonuses to the die rolls, things of that nature. Let's look at the character's personality. What type of advantages and disadvantages do they have where their personality is concerned? I think she's a charismatic person. I'm going to give her charisma as an advantage. And that's going to be charisma +1 for 5 points. And then also looking under my various choices that I've got bookmarked here, I think that she would be curious. And curious comes in 3 different levels, like many advantages and disadvantages do. I'll give her the first level of curious. She's a mage, it makes sense. She's interested in all sorts of things. And that's going to be curious at the -5 level. So our advantages now are worth 10 points. Our disadvantages now are worth 11 points. There we have it. The next thing I would look at is mental conditions, mental disadvantages. I've grouped mine and my bookmarks here under serious mental disadvantages, not just personality quirks, but amnesia. The character has bloodlust. They want their enemies dead. They're callous toward other people. They have some type of compulsive behavior, delusions. These are pretty serious disadvantages. They're paranoid, on the edge, split personality. I mean, these are pretty bad. Really, she doesn't have any strong mental disadvantages. They do give you a lot of points if you look up these various disadvantages, but they can be difficult to play. It takes an experienced role player to play someone that's not going to interfere with the game play and the other players' enjoyment of the game, and still play a character that has a very serious mental condition. However, GURPS is very complete, and those disadvantages are listed there. And they do make great disadvantages for villains, but we're going to skip these and move on to the next thing. Okay, let's move on to the next category. Codes of honor, personal drive. These are advantages and disadvantages that drive the character. What do they stand for? What is their code of honor? And there's some good ones in here that your players can choose to make them really heroes, and at the same time it limits them somewhat. Cannot harm innocence is a great one. It means if the character has a choice to hurt the villain, but it's going, or capture the villain, but it's going to harm an innocent person, they won't do it. It's a great disadvantage for superheroes and crime fighters and things like that. There are various codes of honor listed throughout the different books that you may want to look at. There's a hero's code of honor, pirate's code of honor if you're making up a pirate, a professional code of honor. There's all they're listed throughout the books if you click through them, and you can make up your own. The codes of honor are pretty neat, and kind of gives a guideline for the character. Our character here, Batla, doesn't have a real a code of honor, so to speak. She's a good person, but she at the same time doesn't follow a strict code of honor. I will say that she cannot harm innocent. She wouldn't do that. So under disadvantages, cannot harm innocence. And that's going to be -10 for her disadvantages. So we're at 31. I think she'll also have a sense of duty to her close friends, like many of us do. I think it's a realistic disadvantage, and that would be another -5. She's at -36 on her disadvantages. You also want to think about background advantages and disadvantages. There are plenty of them in the books. Does the character have an alternate identity? Are they a diplomat with diplomatic immunity? Are they heir to some type of fortune? Are they trained by a master? That's normally for your martial art type characters. There's also some disadvantages under background. Is your character cursed or disowned? They have some type of extreme fanaticism for the group that they work for. Primitive's a great one, and secret, of course, is always cool. Do they have some type of secret that no one can know, or it will cause them embarrassment or imprisonment, or maybe even their death if it's discovered? I don't think there's any particular background advantages or disadvantages for this character that would be unusual, so we'll move forward and go to friends, patrons, and enemies. Looking at here, allies, family, group that she's part of. Is there anybody that would come to protect her if she was in danger, or is she a loner? Has she been kicked out of her home? Is she alone? So I would say that she has some type of allies. I think maybe a patron, and I think I'm going to give her a patron, which would be her wizardly master that taught her magical arts. So under advantages, we're going to give her a patron, and we'll talk about that. So we're going to give Batla a patron, and that's going to be an advantage, and it's going to be her wizard master. A powerful individual, if you'll look on page 24 of the basic book, costs 15 points. You can get patrons even more powerful than that, like powerful organizations. Maybe they work for a thieves guild that has its grip tight on an entire city and is a big powerful organization, and you can get patrons like that. In this case, her patron's just a single individual, very powerful, and is worth 15 points. You also want to read, does that patron provide equipment? Do they have special qualities? Her master can cast magic, but he is in a generally magical world, so that's not really a special quality. It's not something that he can provide for her that no one else can generally. So the 15 points stays like that. Now, how often is the patron going to be around? The frequency of the appearance. Now, I imagine in this campaign she's going to leave her village and go out and do some adventuring, so the wizard's rarely going to be of any use to her. So if we look under allies, so above, they use the same chart for the frequency of appearance. Let's go back a little bit. Right here, if the ally appears very rarely, it's half cost, round up. So instead of 15, we're going to divide that by 2. Rounding up is going to be a cost of 8. And the advantages 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. There we go. I'd also like to add here that allies can be a lot of different things. We would think of those as normally friends that this character has, but or someone they could go to seek help. But at the same time, they can be a pet or something of that nature. A magical unicorn that travels with this character could be a powerful ally. So you may want to think out of the box a little bit. You can make up some very interesting allies. Patrons, sure, the wizard, but it could be the group you work with. Like I said, a knight's guild, a knightly order, or a thieves guild, or something like that. Make great patrons, not necessarily a single individual. All right, let's move on. In addition to the patrons and friends, the character may also, in that same thought process, have people that don't like them, enemies. They may have an evil twin or something like that, and you may want to look at those type of disadvantages as well. They may have duties that they can't get away from. If they're part of a organization that requires them to do things, you may have a character that was born from birth and they have a powerful thieves guild patron, but that guild does call upon them sometimes to rob people or to do things that they may not want to do, but they're trapped within that organization, or maybe something they want to do. They have duties to the knightly order they're in, and they're proud to partake of those duties. So you may want to look at that very closely. Does the character have any duties that they are required to perform? There's extremely hazardous duty as well that is appropriate for characters that are soldiers, warriors, things like that. Enemies is a popular one, especially with superhero type stories. The enemy could be police. If your character is Robin Hood is a great example of a hero that had an enemy of the authorities, the police. So pretty neat stuff there. You may want to take a look at those advantages and disadvantages and round out that character. And let's move on to the next section though. All right, another category that I bookmarked in my PDF file here is gut feeling or sixth sense. Does the character have any kind of danger sense or empathy, intuition, that sort of thing? This character would not, but danger sense is pretty great for a character that's going to scout a lot, go ahead of the party, that sort of thing. A thief type, rogue type character, danger sense would be fantastic for that type of character to have. Senses, does the character have any acute senses, better vision, alertness, that sort of thing? You may want to think about that for the character. They can also have bad senses. There's some disadvantages like bad sight, bad smell, hard of hearing. Our character doesn't really have any particularly fantastic senses or sixth senses, so we'll move on to the luck category. Does this character have luck? Daredevil is one. If your character takes a lot of risks, they get a bonus. Good luck, extraordinary luck, things like this are in the book. You can buy luck in GURPS. And once in a while in the game, after so much time has passed, you can re-roll the dice and use the best result of those two rolls, which is pretty neat. And there's some different levels of luck there too. There's super luck in the Supers book. So you may want to think about that. Again, I'm not going to give this character that type of luck, but it's always something to think about. The age of the character, if it's important, there is an age disadvantage if the character is really young or really old. You may also want to actually think about the youth rules. There, in the basic book, there are rules for rolling up children if the character happens to be a child. Again, doesn't apply to this character, but it's always something to think about each time you make up a character. Alright, the next thing we'll talk about is physical advantages and disadvantages. There's lots of advantages to make the character more physically powerful or have some type of bonus. For example, the character might be double jointed, great for thieves and the like. The character may have extra hit points. Too many is unrealistic, but there's some guidelines there. But a character may have a couple of extra hit points. The character may have perfect balance, great for thieves, where they can just run across a rope and people can't catch them. Very Aladdin from the Aladdin Walt Disney movie, where he had great balance and could outrun other people. There's also a big list of physical disadvantages that make up some interesting characters. I wouldn't necessarily just bypass these. A character that has one eye or one hand, just is physically interesting. So you may want to go through these books and take a look at these physical advantages and disadvantages and see if there's something you would like to add to that character that would make them more interesting. Looking through here, I don't see anything that was particularly applied to this character. So we're going to move on and go to the next section. There's also sleeping disadvantages. There's plenty of them listed in the books. You require extra sleep, or you're an insomniac, sleepwalker, or there's advantages where you require less sleep, things like that. So you can also think about those particular types of advantages and disadvantages. There is a long enough list that you could separate it into a separate category, which I did, for alcohol-related advantages and disadvantages. The biggest disadvantage, of course, being alcoholism itself. And those are important in some campaigns, like I made it special notes for the Vikings campaign. If you had a very hardcore type game, but those type of advantages and disadvantages aren't for everybody in every game. It could actually interfere with the role playing if your character's always drunk, but it does fit some characters, so keep it in mind. And then we'll move on to physical and mental addictions. And of course, a physical addiction is alcohol, but there are other addictions that your character might be subject to, such as compulsive behaviors. Your character's doing something that is compulsive, let's see, for examples, what kind of examples they give here. Compulsive lying is an example that they give. Compulsive vowing, things like that. Compulsive playing, you can't quit. There's just, lecherousness, which basically means you can't quit going out and partying. And there's, some interesting aspects of that you could add to your character. Particularly bad one for some villains is murder addiction. Think Freddy Krueger or Jason from the horror movies. They had murder addiction. They can't quit killing people. So those are some of those addictions that are pretty nasty. And finally, we come to the idea of combat-related advantages and disadvantages. These are the ones your players are going to really look heavily at. They're going to really enjoy picking out some of these. And we'll talk about a few of them. Ambidexterity does not give your character the ability to use two weapons at once and make all kind of crazy attacks. However, your character will be able to fight as effectively with both hands. Combat reflexes, absolutely one that every single fighter type character, warrior type character wants to look at. Combat reflexes is extremely useful for fighter type characters. We have high pain threshold. It's a really good one. In GURPS, when your character is hit, he is at a penalty because he is in pain. With the high pain threshold advantage, the character does not have that disadvantage, which is incredibly useful. And there's toughness, which takes out some of the damage if you're hit. Let's say you have toughness of level 1 and you're hit with 6 points of damage, you only take 5 points of damage. Also extremely useful. Trained by Master, Weapon Master are great for martial art type adventures and characters. There are very few combat related disadvantages, but combat paralysis and low pain threshold come to mind, both for characters that are obviously not suited for combat. So I don't see anything in here particularly that would apply to this character. She's not going to be a fighter more than she is going to be a mage, although I do plan for her to have some weapon skill so she can defend herself if necessary with weapons. The next thing we're going to talk about is the character's quirks. You can get up to 5 extra points for making up quirks about your character. These are not really advantages or disadvantages. These are just little aspects about your character. They won't give you any negatives to rolls. They won't make you do things like addictions or obsessions. These are just fun things to know about the character. I've made my own little list here of ideas for quirks that I like to look at each time I'm deciding those 5 things. And I've actually got 5 categories I like to pick from. So let's take a look at those and make up some quirks for this character. They can be anything. Just use your imagination. So let's look at background. Does she have a brother or a sister? Maybe some type of memory. Wants to amend for some horrible action that she did in the past. Things like that. For what in her background comes to mind? I'm going to say that had a brother. We'll put has a brother that does not care for her and thinks she is very strange. Socially, are they uncomfortable around someone? Are they very religious? I'm going to put she thinks dwarves are good people, but too dirty. And then physical look. Is there something she does? Likes to wear green and red. And likes red jewels. Personality. What's about her personality that stands out that's not really an advantage or disadvantages? I'm going to put she smiles a lot. And then what can we say about her goals? She wants to be a mage, obviously. Is she saving up to buy something? She want to become a powerful mage to be rich or to help people? What's her purpose for being a mage. And I'm just going to put fascinated by magic and dreams of becoming a powerful mage to help those in need. And she wants to travel the land and help people with her magical powers. That's 5 quirks. So we can go down here now and put quirks. It's actually -5 for the total of the character because it's going to give the character points. Okay, so there's one more thing to think about. She is going to be a mage, and in the GURPS rules, to make up a wizard, the character has to have the magical aptitude to do that in most normal settings. So your GM may make up a setting where anyone can just learn magic, but in most settings, the character must have magical aptitude, and it's also just called magery. You'll find the magery advantage on page 21 of the basic book, and she definitely does have that advantage. She'll have it only at the first level. It's 15 points and 10 points for each level afterwards. Each level gives you a +1 for any magical skill that you might have. She wants to be a very powerful mage someday, but Magery 1 will exclude her from learning a lot of the more powerful spells. But if the GM allows, maybe she'll find some way someday to increase her magery, which is not normally possible, but who knows what fantasy adventures can bring to these characters. So that's 15 more points for the total. Her advantages, 15 is going to be 36 for that. And of course that raises our point total to 25 character points. So that's a big jump up. But we still have 75 points to spend, and now she can buy regular skills, and she can also learn magical spells. Okay, let's pick out her regular skills. We have different groups that are in the GURPS book. I've made some tabs here, of course, that have all the different skills listed, and we can go through each of these groups pretty easily and sort of figure out what kind of skills that she's going to have. First of all, animal skills. Does she have any particular skills with animals? Not necessarily, but I would say that she had riding. Riding is, riding horses and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and put down riding. And it looks like riding is physical average, so we're going to make a little note of that. It's a physical average skill. That's probably all the animal skills she has. Artistic skills. Is she an artist of any kind? Does she sing or draw? These are neat little things to give characters that only cost a point or two that will just make that character a more believable and better character than others. I believe she would be an artist. I'm going to say she likes to write poetry, and we'll see how good she is, but let's give her poetry. And poetry is a mental average skill. We'll make a note of that. That'll be a really neat little aspect to that character. Is she particularly athletic, acrobatics, things like that? Jumping, juggling, is she any good at those type of things? I'm going to say she's probably good at swimming. And clicking on swimming here, that's a one moment please. Swimming right there, physical easy. Yeah, she knows how to swim, and probably knows how to swim well. And there's juggling and jumping and lifting, and there's just all kinds of neat athletic skills that other characters could choose from as well. The combat skills, what do I imagine? What kind of weapon is she using normally? And I'm going to say she's pretty typical. She's going to have staff. Looking at staff down here, we see that it is a physical hard skill, hard to learn. And just in case, she'll have a dagger. Now the dagger skill in GURPS is called knife, because the dagger is just a really big knife, and so it's physical easy. Okay. Now another thing to remember when we're talking about combat skills is, remember, does the character know how to fight physically without a weapon? A lot of players forget this, that they can just pick brawling, or if the GM allows, if it's that type of campaign, they can even learn karate, judo, those type of skills. But a lot of characters would know how to brawl, the fighter type characters. Doesn't really apply to Battla. I think she wouldn't be very good in a physical fight without her weapons. So we'll move on from there. Craft skills. Does she know how to cook, perhaps? Is she any good at that? Does she know how to build anything, make anything, weave, or do carpentry work? I'm going to say no. Most of her time is spent learning magic. Probably knows how to cook just a little bit. So we're going to go to cooking here. And we find out it's a mental easy skill. See, these are pretty easy. We're going through these pretty fast. Hobby skills. No time for hobbies. She studies magic, things like that. There are some special rules under hobby skills where you can get the skills a little cheaper. They're half price, as a matter of fact, and you can, but their hobby skills do not worth a lot in a fight. Knowledge skills. Well, we can look over here. Does she have any particular bardic lore, hidden lore? Hidden lore is a really neat one because you can know things other people can't, like fairy lore. Has she studied any of this? And city secrets is a great one for hidden lore. For characters like thieves that are a member of a thieves guild, they know the underbelly of the city and things like that. So probably not, although I'm going to say that she is going to have fairy lore. She's probably obsessed or very interested, curious in fairies. So we'll do a hidden lore. Fairies. And hidden lore, the skill itself is mental average. We'll make a note of that. Okay. We're going to continue on to magical skills. You don't have to have these skills to use spells, except for ones that we'll talk about. Spell throwing. There's different spell throwing skills like ball, ice, dagger, silk. And when you use a spell that you throw or attack with, you have to use that skill. You're just like you have to learn to throw a knife, you have to learn to throw a spell. And so those are ones that we might come back to and learn depending on what spells we pick. The other magic breath and magic jet are the same way. I don't see anything in here particularly that she would know that would be applicable to her character. So we'll move on. Magical and power-based skills like body sense, flight. These are things that you might want to have when you are using certain spells and abilities. We'll skip through those as well. Medical skills. Does she have first aid? That sort of thing. I would say being a smart person and a traveler, she probably has first aid. So, as many adventurers probably do. We click on first aid here, and it looks like that is a mental easy skill. Okay. Military skills, probably not. She doesn't have strategy, tactics, anything like that. Language skills, and this is a fun one. Can she speak any other language besides her own language, which is Elvish? And yes, she can speak the normal language of English, which is going to be a mental average skill. That's kind of funny because it won't be her first language, so she may have some difficulty understanding complex ideas verbally because she speaks English second, and Elvish will be her natural fluid language. Always remember when you're making up a character that's not human that you may want to think about, does the character speak any their own language and the human language? You can't speak both automatically. You'd have to choose one or the other. And then learn other languages as you like, just like we just did. Okay, so let's go to outdoor skills. Now this one's going to be a big one for an elf, obviously. They might have a lot of outdoor skills. And so let's take a look at these and see what we've got. Animal guys, probably not. area knowledge. She probably does have area knowledge. Of the Great Wood, that's where she's from. We'll say it's a mental easy skill. It just means when she's in the Great Wood, her home, that she has knowledge of all there's a hidden cave over here, and this waterfall has a place you can hide behind it, and we can get the berries from this area, food easily, hunting's good in this area, that sort of thing. Let's see here. Climbing, she would be a good climber. Probably would be a good idea for me to add that to the athletic skills as well, but it's an outdoor skill according to GURPS. So climbing, and that's going to be physical average. Fishing, hiking, hunting, probably not. Hunting, maybe. I think elves are more vegetarian. They probably don't like to hunt, so I'm not going to do that. Naturalist is a general knowledge of animals and plants and nature in its various forms. I think naturalist would fit her well. And a naturalist is going to be mental hard. All right, going on. I see survival, and she definitely would have survival by area type. So you have to choose an area type when you do survival. Is she good at woodlands, jungle, etc.? Woodlands, obviously. And then we are going to make a note that that is mental average. All right. We go down to tracking, and that's mental average, and I think she would have that just being an elf in the woods growing up. They learn how to track people. Professional skills, this is a good list to look at for a lot of characters. Do they know the law? Are they a professional of some kind? Professional soldier, professional childcare. There's lots of different professions the characters can choose from. That doesn't really apply to this character, so we'll pass on that. No psionic skills. Do you have any scientific skills? No, obviously she's not a scientist, but you can still choose scientific skills for the characters. For example, they may know maybe a herbalist, where they know about different plants and stuff. They may have some type of skill in occultism, things of that nature. The occultism is a study of mysterious and supernatural, mysticism, magical beliefs, ancient rituals, hauntings, etc. I don't think that would apply to this character, but it would apply to many types of wizards. She's just not that type of wizard in my own opinion. But there's lots of philosophy as a great one for characters. Research, very popular. Lots of science skills to pick from. Don't think I'm going to give her any particular science skills. Social skills are great, especially for thief-type characters. Acting, bard, diplomacy, gambling, things like that, intimidation. Lots to choose from. Savoir-faire, if the character is in a lot of situations where they need to know how to act. Sex appeal, for those characters that use sex to get what they want. Their sexual appeal. Spies, sometimes, people like that. Strategy and tactics fall under social skills as well. Can they outthink their opponent? There's not a lot here I see for this character. I don't see her as fast-talking people or making big public speeches. I'm going to go ahead and pass on these, but they're always interesting to look at. They really are. Thief and spy skills, these really get down to the dark characters that like to sneak around. They can detect lies. They can disguise themselves, fast talk, things like that. Pickpocket, knowledge of poisons, streetwise characters. Literally, there's a streetwise skill there where your character knows how the street works. Again, doesn't really apply to this character, but a great set of skills. There's vehicle skills for more high tech, but there are skills like sailor, for example, for medieval type settings that you might want to look at. And then esoteric skills, but those are more for your martial arts type. So I think we've covered everything. She's got the skills that I want her to have here. She's got weapon skills. She's got the ability to take care of herself. So now we have to figure out how much those skills cost, and that brings us to our skill chart. Okay, I quickly made a couple of columns on our character sheet here. I have redid the character points. The skills cost 28 points. Our character now has a total of 53 points used. We've only used about half of our character points, and we've got a nice big character going with lots of advantages and skills. Really neat character. I'm really liking the way she's turning out. And we have to give her her racial package. She is an elf, so we have to go through and find that package and apply that to her. The elf racial package is listed 2 or 3 different places. In the basic book, which you might be using, the elf costs 40 points to play. So let's go to race 40. And let's see what that does for our character. To create a character who's an elf, add 1 point to his final dex and 1 point to IQ. So 13 and 13. Okay. Subtract 1 from strength. So it's going to make her strength an 8. Not very strong. An elf weighs 15 less than a normal human. All elves get combat reflexes advantage and 1 level of magical aptitude automatically. It costs 40 points. So she has combat reflexes. From her racial template. And then the magery 1 is going to be from the racial template as well. So the advantages are going to change price here. That 15 points is taken off of the 36. So that's going to be 21 again. All right, so I'm going to put a little asterisk mark beside strength, dex, and intelligence. And down here underneath attributes, I'm just going to note that that means after modifications from here we go. Now, since her dexterity and intelligence went up by 1, and all of her skills are based on dexterity and intelligence, all of her skills will go up by 1. But the cost is the same. So there we are, all caught up with her skills. So now we're going to give her her magical spells. Doing a little quick math, we have 22 points left for this character. The spells work like skills. You choose a spell, you use the same skill chart that we used before to learn that spell. All spells are considered mental hard, except for those that are listed as mental very hard. Now you can't just pick a spell out and learn it, just pick one off the list. Some spells are more powerful than others, and you have to slowly learn the spells required to learn that more powerful spell. There are no spell levels or anything like that. You simply have to know a combination of knowledge to learn the next spell. So for example, to learn a exploding fireball, you have to first learn how to create fire, and you have to learn how to shoot fire out of your hand and things like that. You can finally learn that big powerful fire, exploding fireball spell. But you have to learn what's called the prerequisites first to be able to cast that higher spell. Sometimes you may be required to have a certain advantage or even a certain level of magery to be able to learn that powerful spell. So let's give an example. Let's let her learn some spells here, and we'll go through that particular process. So what kind of spells does she have? Animal spells. She's an elf. That would make perfect sense. So learning Master. She can hold a beast motionless and quiet as long as she maintains eye contact and concentration. I like that. But to learn Master, she has to know Beast Soother. To learn Beast Soother, you have to learn Persuasion, then Sense Emotion, Sense Foes, And all of these skills that are required have to be at 12 before you can learn the next one. Those are the prerequisites. So for example, you would start out learning sense foes. It has no prerequisite down here. You can see that. So we're going to learn sense foes. And we'll put 2 points into that later. And then we're also going to look at sense emotion. Sense emotion requires sense foes, and we know that we'll have that at 12 or more. So we're also going to learn sense emotion. So then we need to learn persuasion. Persuasion requires sense emotion, and we'll have that. Then we need to learn beast soother, same thing. And then finally we would be able to learn master. Alright, so there we go. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spells. All of them are going to be mental hard spells. So we go to mental, hard. We're going to put 2 points into these each, which will get us that 12 that we need to use them as prerequisites for other spells. Perfect. Now if your intelligence is lower, you may have to use more points to be able to get to that skill level of 12 that you need. Luckily, we just have to do 2 each. So let's do this. And that'll get her skills with animals. She can also now sense the emotions of people, and she has persuasion where she can cast a magical spell and try to persuade people to do things. She can sense enemies. You know, lots of use for these spells besides just the animal use, obviously. So we're going to choose as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We used about half of our spell points. And we've got our animal stuff kind of out of the way. I think that's all we'll do for animal spells. Being an elf and being in a medieval fantasy setting where wizards can learn to heal, I think I would like her to learn minor healing. Let's see what the prerequisite is. It says she has to have magery, which she does, and I'm looking at major healing. Minor healing here has a prerequisite of lend health. So she can't learn minor healing just yet. She has to learn lend health first. So let's find lend health. It has a prerequisite of lend strength, which it has a prerequisite of magery, which she has. So right now she's going to have to learn lend strength. Then she can continue on to lend health. And now that she knows lend strength and lend health, she can learn minor healing. And I'm going to follow the same thing I did before. It's a mental hard skill, each one of those. She'll spend 2 points in each one of those as well. So how many have we spent? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. We still have a few spells we can learn. Neutralize poison is always a good one. Let's see what we would need. Cure disease or magery 3. No, so she doesn't have magery 3. She only has magery 1, so she would not be able to learn that spell. Not yet, anyhow. She's a beginning character. So she's got some animal skills, and she's got some healing spells. What else, perhaps, would we like her to have? There's movement spells, always fun. Maybe she could use it. She's not much of a fighter. If she needs to get out of the way, let's look up under movement spells. Haste doesn't have a prerequisite. Lets the subject move faster. Maybe that could help her run out of the way. For every point into she gets to add to her move score, so it would help her run away if she needed to. I like it. We'll do haste. There we are. She has magery and haste, so she could do quick march and she could travel long distances at a better rate. Interesting. I'm not sure exactly that I want that for this character. Apportation, she can move objects without touching them. I like that. I think that's a really neat ability to have. And we use 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we have one more spell we can learn. So let's choose that. She has apportation. I'm going to give her slow fall. So if she falls off a cliff or something like that, she can very slowly go to the ground. And that's going to be 22 points. Her spells here are going to be 22 points. And that's going to give us our 100-point character total that we were looking for. Okay, now we come to buying equipment with her money. She's got 200. Of course, she could sell the other 800 she had as starting wealth and just be an adventurer, which is what she'll probably do. But let's see just how much money she needs. You'll see that the equipment table is on page 212 of the basic book. You'll also find the in that same area you'll find armor and the weapons and equipment. 206 are some more weapons, things like that. But now I've got a handy page that I've made myself for my particular fantasy setting, and these do come from the book. So let's see what I'm going to spend my 200 on. First, I know she wants a quarterstaff. So much easier for me just to copy and paste. We'll make this the same size. Okay. All right, and that's going to be 10, leaving her with 190. What else do we have here? She has the knife skill, so a dagger would be great. Just going to change some of these notes to where we're not taking up so much room. There we are. So she's got a quarterstaff, a dagger. The dagger was 20, so that brings us down to 170. Okay. And then that's pretty much all she needs as far as weapons. Let's look at her armor she'll have. Now in GURPS, wizards can wear armor. There's nothing that stops that from happening. People can know magic and wear armor. Doesn't really make a lot of sense that they couldn't in other popular games. Let's see how much she has left to spend. 170 without selling all of her personal belongings. Armor is kind of expensive right now. I don't think she's going to have any particular armor. Maybe light leather. And that light leather is PD 1, DR1, and the weight is 10 pounds. And we'll also just highlight that with a color, just for fun. There we go, and that's 210. A little bit more than she has, but she will sell 100 of her personal belongings to give her 270. And since it's 210, that's only going to leave her with 60 coin. Okay. There's lots of equipment that she can buy as well: food, medical gear, equipment, things like that. Okay, I did some rearranging here, made this look a little neater. I bought some basic equipment, and it looks like she has 15 coins left, and she has a total weight of 16.25. So let's talk about encumbrance. Encumbrance can slow you down. This character has a move score, or will have a move score when we do that in a moment. And if she's carrying too much, the move score will go down. So she's carrying 16.25 pounds. She has a strength of an 8 because she's an elf. She would go to the encumbrance chart here. You're going to this chart's on page 76 of the basic book, and she's going to use the column there for strength of 8. Now she's carrying more than 16 pounds, but not 32 pounds. So it looks like she's going to be lightly encumbered. Anything over 16 pounds is going to cause her to be encumbered, and her move will decrease by 1. That's what's that right there in that little parentheses. That's how much your move decreases by. So if you're carrying a lot, like if you throw somebody over your back and you're carrying a lot of weight, you can really decrease your move, considering your move score is normally going to be about a 5 or a 6. So she's carrying too much weight. She's carrying over 16 pounds, just barely, and she needs to get rid of some weight. So let's see, what does she have here? She's got a first aid kit that weighs 2 pounds. It adds 1 to the first aid skill, but you can still use first aid without it. I'm going to get rid of that first aid kit. I'm going to give her 30 back. That 2 pound comes off of this. She's now carrying 14.25 pounds, and she is not going to be encumbered. This is a very useful tool for controlling the players who want to just gather more and more and more stuff, and they have a list of 100 items. Realistically, your characters could not carry that many items. It's also a really good reason for the characters to get a horse or a mule or some type of other steed that can be used to carry items, which is what they were normally used for back in the real medieval days. They were used as pack animals more than they were for riding animals. Alright, so we're going to talk about your final scores. There's a few things we need to do. We're almost done, and we'll have a complete character. Okay, let's talk about the combat scores for these characters. The first thing we're going to talk about is the character's height and weight. So we have this table here. The height's going to be the same, but we understand that our elven character is going to be about 15 pounds lighter than the typical character. So we'll go to height. The average height for a strength of 8 is going to be 5'7". So we'll keep that 5 foot. Make her 5'6". The average weight for a character with a strength of 8 is 140 pounds. So we're going to go to 125 pounds. Okay, so easy enough. Those height and weight charts are found on page 15 of the basic book. Handedness, it's just a choice. What right-handed, left-handed. We'll just put handedness. She is right-handed. Okay. Then we go to the character's speed. The speed of the character is the character's dexterity plus their health divided by 4. So we have dexterity of 13 plus the health of 10 is going to be 23, and we divide that by 4. Now, in this case, the speed is not rounded. You just say 23 times 4, and that gives, 23 divided by 4 gives us that speed. And again, that is dex plus health divided by 4. Alright, this gives us a total of 5.75 as a speed score. We'll talk about your move score. Move is equal to your speed rounded down. So 5.75 was the speed, her move will be a 5. That's how many yards she can move also in a second. So each turn she can move 5 hexes using, give or take, using the movement rules provided in the game. Have other videos that talk about that. Dodge is equal to move. So dodge here is going to be equal to 5. And the reason we list that separately is because there are some advantages, disadvantages, armor, and the like that will affect dodge. As a matter of fact, the passive defense of any armor adds to your dodge. So she is wearing light leather, which adds +1, so 6. And I'm just going to put in parentheses, move plus PD from armor. Alright, there we go. Let's talk about hit points. Hit points are equal to health. There's an optional rule where you can use strength if you like. A lot of people think that makes more sense. I'm going to make this an official character though, and her hit points are equal to her health. Her health is a 10, so her hit points are a 10. Unlike some games, that will never change for her. There is an advantage called extra hit points that you can get, but as the character becomes more skilled, they don't become more, they don't gain the ability to take more and more damage. That doesn't make any logical sense. So in GURPS, that hit point score will stay the same. Alright, we'll talk about the block score. It won't apply to this character, but if you have a shield, you block with 1/2 of your shield skill, which is pretty impressive. You get your passive defense as well, so you can have a very high chance to defend if you have a shield, which is what a shield is made for. But this character doesn't have block, so we're going to take that off. But just to note, your blocking rules are on page 98 of the basic book. You can only block 1 attack per turn unless you take an all-out defense. You could block 2 separate attacks with your shield in that turn. Alright, we'll talk about parrying. With most weapons, you parry with half of your skill plus the PD from whatever armor that you're using. Now, in the case of a quarterstaff, it says that the parry is 2/3 of the staff skill. I believe you can find those rules underneath the skill description of staff. Her staff skill is 13, so we're going to do 2/3, so 13 divided by 3 is 4. So she will have a parry of 8, and then 9 because of her armor. There we go. So there we are. So those are your block and parry and dodge. You've got your speed and all of that. We'll talk a second about perception scores. Now there is a rule, a sense roll rule that it's supposed to be based on IQ, but just because you're smarter doesn't mean necessarily that you can see better or that you can hear better. So there was an optional rule that I really love in Compendium 1 where your sight and your hearing, all those subscores, courage, willpower, all start out at 10. And then any advantages or disadvantages you have will cause those scores to go up or down. For example, if you had fearlessness at +1, your courage would get +1. If you had strong willpower, your willpower increases, by however much the advantages is. If you had keen sight or acute sight of +2, your sight goes up by 2 points, that kind of thing. In this case, she doesn't have any type of advantages or disadvantages like that. So her sight, hearing, courage, willpower, all that's going to be a normal 10. And that's it for the combat scores that we need to play the game. So the last thing we'll talk about is the character's occupation. They're not... They might become adventurers or they're becoming adventurers, but at one point they had a job in their society, especially if they have some type of wealth. Our character has an average wealth. So what does she do for her village? I think with her magical skills, she would definitely be a healer. She can heal people, and that would be very valuable to her society. An average job, if you look at the job table on page 194, and there's lots of these job tables throughout the other GURPS books, we have a listing of some common jobs here. An average job makes somewhere between 800 and 1,000, 700 to 1,000. So I'm going to say a healer is a very respected job. It's an average job because of her wealth rating. If she had a higher wealth rating, she would actually make more as a healer. But in this case, she's going to make about $900 a month. That would be her monthly income if she is not adventuring and she works as a healer. We're just going to make a note of that. Let's see here. Under wealth and equipment, I'm going to put occupation, healer, and I'm going to put 900 a month. Now there's lots of rules around jobs if you wanted to get very realistic and make the characters work for a living. Most of us won't do that. We'll have characters that are adventurers and they get their money from adventuring. But if you wanted to make it realistic and you wanted to go into detail about having a job, those rules are in the GURPS book. Around page 194 is the chart, but the rules actually start a little before that on page 192. And that'll be for another video. There's lots of rules there. But we know her basic job and how much money she makes. You'll need to work with the GM to determine exactly how much money these characters make per month based on the job descriptions that they might have in the various books. So it's always good to go back one more time and check your advantages to see if they have affected the final outcome of the character. So let's check those out. We have fearlessness +2. So let's check out our courage. Courage should actually be a 12 because we got the +2 from fearlessness. We also gained combat reflexes from our racial template. So let's check out combat reflexes. Let's look that up. Combat reflexes says you get +1 to any active defense in combat and +2 to any fright check. So that's another 2 that we're going to get on courage. And our active defenses, which are parry, is going to move up to a 10. I'm going to put in combat reflexes. And dodge is a 7 also. From combat reflexes. Okay. Let's check out anything else. Nope, I think that's it. Magery 1. So all of our spells we purchased gave us scores of around 12 for these spells, but Magery 1 gives these spells +1 each. So each one of these spells is actually 13 because we purchased them at 12, but they get +1 from our Magery. So it's always a great idea to go back and make sure that we've applied all of our advantages to our skills, to our spells, to our combat scores. And there we are. We're going to save that. We've double checked the character. She looks great. It's a complete character, ready to go. I hope you guys enjoyed being with me as we made up this character, and thanks for watching.